Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, That Creepy Reading. We're gonna be reading 3 horrifying creepypastas. Now, I know you guys like those Let's Not Meet stories, but understand that creepypastas come from a place that suggests a possibility of truth too. So keep that in mind as we continue. As with the Let's Not Meet stories, there will be a number, along with the author's name and title of the story. We all want to give credit, and we all want to be scared. So sit back, turn the lights down, prepare to be scared. These are 3 horrifying creepypastas you might not have heard of. Chicken Bones by Stephen Shorter. Hi, no, you're not late at all. Please come in. Stay. I don't know if you're from somewhere. You're one of those pretty famous reporters, right? You seem really familiar. Can I get you some tea or coffee, or would you rather get on with the interview? Sorry, I really don't know how this works. I've never been interviewed before. I pretty much shut myself off from the press after those kids went missing. I don't need any kind of attention like that. Suppose I'll start my story by setting the scene. The village of Turgwin was pretty quiet nowadays. It wasn't always so back in the 90s. The mayor was given a government grant to build a new school, which would cater to all the small towns and hamlets surrounding the valleys. I was fresh out of university back then, and I just finished my training to become a teacher, and I was eager to start my professional job, so I was thrilled to be offered a place at Turgwin Infant School. I could finally prove myself by doing something that I loved. The dolls changed all that. Oh, they changed all that. A thick fog had rolled over the mountains and was dribbling down into Gwyn Valley, clinging to the top of the lake and probing the town with slim tendrils that carried a light winter breeze. The school bus had already arrived, and the children were lining up to go inside. They were shivering in their fucking school jumpers and weird fucking jackets. I skimmed the register and noted that all were, well, present, except for a 5-year-old boy called Gavin Lewis. His photograph was a gap-toothed boy with, well, straw-colored hair. I remember thinking to myself that it seemed like he was grinning up at me from the paper. Reassuring myself I could not always be perfect, I ushered my class indoors, and shooting one last hopeful glance out into the white-tinged street beyond the railings, I shut the door behind me. My first lesson went well, an introductory lesson to allow the kids to settle in, make friends, and have their own first day reading group. The Hungry Caterpillar was a huge success, and the children were left to change for gym in their respectable changing rooms. I wandered outside, and I thought to myself it was oddly chilly for this time of year, and I was debating whether or not to hold class indoors. That's when I heard it. It was like this hollow rattling noise. Hello? There was no reply, but I followed the sound to the playground gate, which backed into the main road out of town. There was a little doll tied to the bars. I regarded it for a moment. It was a slightly misshapen object with a wool body and a face made out of some type of white ceramic material. A tangle of gaudy yellow thread was attached to its head, and the face had a disturbingly vacant gap-toothed smile painted on. The face was oddly similar to Gavin Lewis, and it just reminded me of him. I unhooked the doll string from the gabbet. It felt odd as I turned it over in my hands. It was much heavier than it should have been, and had a odd soft exterior too. I took it back to my empty classroom and examined it further. There seemed to be a seam running up the back that was, well, deliberately loose. I tugged at it and the doll just fell apart, literally with no effort at all. My hands, bones, small and dry, spilled out onto my desk with a clatter which echoed. And that's when I noticed the noise of running feet outside my door. I pulled my jacket over the mess, and the classroom suddenly filled with excited children ready to play outside. My heart was pounding, and despite the cold day, I realized that I was sweating. What the fuck did I just find? Children, I shouted. We're gonna be doing PE indoors today, alright? This is met with a chorus of disappointing groans, but no objections. They filed into the gym hall, and I arranged for one of the other teachers to keep an eye on the class. And then I hurried to the staff room. I found a number of Gavin's parents in the school register, and I dialed it, and I got no answer. I left an urgent request for his mother to contact me. Then I went to go tell the headmistress. I showed her the bones, and then she went white. Are they, are these human? She asked. I told her I had no idea, but they were fairly small, and it seemed rather odd if they were human. After a moment of deliberation, we phoned the police, and then the first officer entered the room and recoiled at the sight. "Oh my God, Lord above," he would cry. His colleague turned the larger ones over in his hands, and then he said, buddy, these are chicken bones." I asked him if he was sure, and he told me that he'd grown up on a farm and he was well acquainted with animal bones. What happens now?" asked the headmistress. It's obvious this is some kind of threat by the tone of this, or at the very least, some sort of sick joke. The men gathered up the remains of the doll and took some of Gavin's records. I was assured that they would keep an eye on the school, and true to their word, another patrol car pulled up outside the gate just as the first one did. But strangely enough, the rest of the day was fairly normal. The kids caught on to the mute horror being displayed by their teachers, but aside of the general air of nervousness, the schedule proceeded as normal. Eventually the school day ended, and the parents, unaware of the eerie happenings, arrived in a mess to collect their children. Those left caught the bus home, and we did our best to make sure that everyone got away okay. But we're wary about telling anyone about what happened. We didn't want to panic, especially if we didn't know this was just some sort of unrelated incident or a joke or something along those lines. I was told that the police would call me in the morning to take a statement, and I should go home. The next morning I checked my phone, but there was nothing from the police. I wasn't really surprised. This was 1998. And this is post Stephen Lawrence inquiry. So the police representation throughout the UK was at the time low. Such an oversight was definitely possible in my books. So I waited for an hour, but I figured that if they desperately needed to contact me, they could always just phone the school. I arrived later than usual, meeting with some of the children as their parents dropped them off. This was coupled with a new patrol car parked on the corner, and that reassured me for a bit of a time. It took me about 15 minutes to realize that the bus had not arrived. The playground was almost empty in comparison to the previous day. I put a few kids at present to work on some story writing, and then I phoned a bus company. No, they hadn't heard from the driver. He was just probably caught up in traffic on his way through the next town along, and I was like, yeah, right. I could recall feeling ill at the time. Something awful had happened to those children, and a crushing pain of guilt hit me, almost like a weight pushing down my guts to my groin. I felt as though I should have warned the parents the day before. I needed air, and I stumbled onto the playground. That's when I heard it again. A faint rattling sound. I could only describe it like that. It was weird. Once again, swaying in the wind on autopilot, nausea had forgotten, and I wandered to the gate. Along the fence, in neat rows, was identical giblets, hung 32 little dolls. I didn't need to look at the register. I'd always been good with faces. The children smiling up at me from their desks the day before were the kids smiling at me now, faces frozen in elation. There was something off about their eyes though. They were painted in detail on the ceramic heads. The eyes looked different. Fear, pain, and anguish was registered in their expressions. Everything was a bit of a blur after that, but I definitely remember hammering on the police windows, screaming at them to get out, and it was about then that I saw through the slightly tinted black window, slightly larger than the child dolls, and dressed in immaculate little police uniforms, was complete with crude with yet shiny eye. Oh my god. I slammed on the classroom door behind me, no longer caring whether the children knew something was up, and I begun to cry. What the fuck had I done to deserve this? I must have passed out at some point, because I woke up with one of the beanbags in the reading room with a doctor taking my pulse. I tried to speak, but my voice was hoarse, and almost like a whisper. The man reassured me that the children had been taken home and that school was closed. More patrol cars were arriving at the time. They rolled around the crime scene, and crime scene tape was placed up. I think I heard a helicopter going by too. I was obviously in no fit state to give an interview at the time, but I managed to tell them everything I knew before I was taken to the hospital and treated for shock. As they escorted me to an awaiting ambulance, a reporter shoved a camera in my face and tried to take my photo. A policeman shoved him back as he did so, and I was shut inside the vehicle away from prying eyes. That almost concludes my part in the story. I quit my job, and I didn't have my house for the weeks following the incident, with one exception. It had been raining, and the fog outside seemed to have all but washed away. I was listening to a local radio station when they begun to jabber about a supposedly important update in the missing children's case. Hikers had found a school bus, empty but intact, part of the way up the mountain. Police were said to have closed off the nearby farmhouse and barn and weren't letting anyone through. Needless to say, I made my way up to the house, and the area was heavy with reporters. And even as I parked, TV crews were setting up for mid-news bulletins, and another thing I noticed was that there were chickens. Several hundred at least, roaming wild all over the compound. A uniformed officer abruptly halted my advance, blocking the garden gate. Over his shoulder, I could glimpse forensic teams going into the house. What the hell had they found in there? Sorry, mate. You're not allowed in. Please. You don't understand. I need to know what happened. Well, we'll tell the press in good time, but for now, you need to get back to the cars. I went home, kept the television on, but for most of the day, just repeated the same arbitrary details that the house was unoccupied, no arrests were made, blah, 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 blah. That evening, however, things changed. They played a short clip from what looked like to be shot from a mobile phone, allegedly leaked footage. A cameraman was standing in a narrow hallway, which ends in a downward staircase. He then descends into the darkness for a short moment as he looks at the clips. Suddenly, a dim electric light snaps on and reveals the basement area with a damp stone wall, floors and ceilings, and he pauses and lets the camera pan over the area. The entire room is filled with strings for what appear to be white beads, and the entire room was filled with white beads and strings as tall as the wall. The camera zoomed in on the beads, and it slowly starts to look like bones, but these weren't just chicken bones. They were not broken up into fragments like the bones in the dolls. It was clear that I suppressed my urge not to vomit. Finger bones, dozens, perhaps hundreds of tiny finger bones dangling from strings in a macabre curtain. And the cameraman mumbles some sort of horrified curse, and the video abruptly ends. I went up there the other week. I just got your email asking to do an interview, and it got me thinking. It's been so many years, and I wanted to see for myself. I know breaking and entering, but come on, I had to know what it was like. Perhaps the police missed something they never caught. They never caught anyone, and nobody ever found the rest of the remains. So in a way, I was helping the investigation. It's not like anyone goes up there anymore. The boards across the door frame were rotten, and it was fairly easy to crowbar my way inside. They cut the power a few months after this happened, so I had to rely on my torch, which, for you Americans, is a flashlight, which narrowed my search considerably. I did find something though. I'm guessing they never searched the coal shed behind the house, It was another cellar area, cramped, and it contained just a workbench with a few barrels of chicken feed. I pried one of them open and poked at the stuff inside with my crowbar. Ordinary feed mixed with some sort of powdery substance. I glanced over the desk, which, well, sat on mortar and pestle. Inside was what appeared to be a half-grown bone. Though human or chicken, I could not say. I was about to leave and run to the authorities, and then I saw some files under the workbench. Generic plastic sleeves, keeping documents safe from the elements. They were even dated, one every 5 years, with the earliest being in the mid-1970s and the latest being dated in the 1990s. I flipped the letter open, tipped its contents onto the tabletop. Photographs of children in a playground and apparently taken from inside a car. Near the back of the pile, there was a picture of 2 police officers in a patrol car, oblivious to the presence of a photographer. The final picture is of me, but not just any picture though. I remembered exactly where I was when it was taken. Blurred by movement, it was partially obscured by a hand of a police officer shoving the photographer away. And I could just make out myself being bundled into an ambulance. There was just one other object in the folder. A doll. It was only half finished. The face had not been completed. And one of the arms had not been fully attached. The resemblance was uncanny, however. Everything was familiar, from the brown suit right down to the stupid teddy boy hairstyle I had in the 90s. The fucking doll was me. No, I was glad to help. I guess sometimes we get over events by reveling enough into times. Just hope I don't get into trouble for the breaking in part. You won't publish that, right? Good. So, yeah, here's a photograph to prove that I was down there. Go ahead. Old Man Werther by Hack Shuck. I lived next door to Old Man Werther for the first 7 years of my life, but I've only ever saw him twice. No one in my neighborhood knew much about him, or ever really saw him leave his house, which stood dark and silent all year round. His back garden was always a mess, with dying flowers and brown, scratchy shrubs growing out of control. But the grass and the brushes never became quite so badly overgrown that you knew it was entirely neglected. My dad used to joke that Old Man Werther tended his garden at the dead of night, which I always found odd, and at the time I didn't really understand what the expression meant. However, my best friend N lived next door but one, with an Old Man Werther in between. N was mad about football, and we never really seemed to do anything after school but boot the ball about our backyards. And, of course, every 5 minutes the ball would be over the fence onto a reclusive neighbor's property. We learned that knocking on his door was of no use, so whoever kicked it would climb over the fence, retrieve it themselves. I dreaded going and rooting through the tall bushes for the ball. Sometimes I thought I saw curtains twitch into gloom. N was always more bolder than I was. I was more of a recluse, while he was the more big, manly man type. And he'd tease me often, knowing that I was really afraid of that guy. He'd shout, "Old Man Werther's looking out upstairs window, hurry up!" And then he would open the back door as if to insinuate it was opening. I wasn't quite gullible enough to believe him though, but I still couldn't breathe until I had that ball back and flung myself safely over that fence. And I should mention that N wasn't really a bad kid. He was just that cocky jock piss taker. When it was his turn to fetch the football, he'd pee in a bush, stomp on it as many decaying flowers as he could, and then he'd creep right up behind his black windows and peek inside. He'd tell me that the curtains would snap shut, but I always thought that he was just, well, joking around. A thin kitchen window always was open a crack, and he'd suggest to try to open it further and climb inside to see if the old man had secretly croaked years ago, as it was widely assumed that was the case. Actually, there was this whole legend about the guy. One afternoon after school, I was aimlessly kicking this ball about, alone, as Mr. N hadn't really called around, even though he said he would. Inevitably, the ball went over, and in horror, I watched it bounce against the old oak tree, and then sail straight down Old Man Wither's house, much closer than I'd ever seen before. My heart went still. It was eternity to creep along the long yellow grass before I finally lifted the ball, feeling like Indiana Jones when he held aloft a golden statue. Emboldened, I was, feeling compelled to take a quick look through that near window. It was nothing but a pure black hole with tethered down brown curtains on either side. I was about to turn and stride away when I saw a movement, and then a face appeared. It was my friend N. He was only there for a second, but his face was bright red. He looked me in the eye as though he was crying with a flood of tears. I couldn't hear him though. The dirty glass, it looked like he was screaming his lungs out. Then an arm, so thin, so pale, it almost looked like bone, hooked N beneath the chin, and he vanished. The curtains were thrust shut. 3 seconds later, I was hammering at my back door. I was trying to get let in. My mom thought I was messing about at first, then she shrugged and said that I imagined things. She knew I was scared of our strange neighbor, but she soon begun to take me seriously and phoned N's mother, who awfully was surprised that N hadn't returned from school whatsoever. She'd assumed that she'd gone straight around to my house. The police were called and several officers visited the old man's house. A nice young officer spoke to me for what seemed like 4 hours, but no trace of N was ever found. Despite the further scratches over the next few days, the same young officer returned a week later and told me that Mr. Werther wasn't a suspect, and that maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. She pointed out that Mr. Werther was in his late 80s and had never been in any kind of trouble before. But she seemed troubled and unsure of her own words. Something came to light during the investigation, though, that surprised the entire neighborhood. Old Man Werther earned his livings as a rather brilliant children's illustrator. The police had found literally thousands of small sketches over his walls. He'd work with the same prolific author for years, churning about 4 to 5 children's novels maybe every couple of months. I wasn't a big reader, but I thought I'd spotted one of their books in our school library, so I didn't waste any time the next day. I couldn't wait to have a look. I soon wished I hadn't. It was a cheesy novel featuring a group of kids, around my age in fact, who solved burglaries or something along those lines. There were 15 to 16 illustrations breaking up the walls of texts, and one picture was of 3 boys playing football in a suburban backyard, and it didn't half resemble me and N and another lad we knew. Even the clothes were similar. My hands were trembling. I flicked through the book, and there I was again, along with more kids, all who seemingly resembled kids who'd lived near me. One picture showed N creeping through an overgrown garden to peer through a dark window. I shoved the book in my mom's face and blabbered about the spooky similarities, but it was trained and listless faces. My mom changed the subject a great deal over the long week. N's mom was a good friend, and N himself had a rambunctious cheekiness that his mom seemed to love. The neighborhood had changed forever, and we only stayed there for a few more weeks before finding new houses across the town. She assured me that any resemblance was merely coincidence, or possibly taken from still life, as he was an old man who probably looked out of his windows on occasion. And we did go into his yard quite a bit. That was all in my little mind. I spent the last 3 weeks in my old house terrified, but I thought that Mr. Werther was peering from his upstairs window, from where he had a clever view of 9 or 10 local backyards. and maybe 20 local children. I didn't like to play football there anymore. I cycled back to the old street once or twice over the years, figuring Old Man Werther must have died by then. I think I was seeking some sort of confirmation of some sort, but each time I returned, that one house stood out on the otherwise bright and lively road with its dead plants, dark windows. He'd be over 100 by now. Perhaps he's still in there. I don't know. The last time I ever went back, I saw the young family who had moved into our old house. Their 5 kids aged to about 3 and 10 respectively. They were screaming to daylights as they kicked the football around. The second time I saw Mr. Werther was a few days before I moved away. I became a very troubled young man, as I had, deep fears of many things, and it made my nightmares pretty bad, because, let's face it, I'm not really the most, bold person, as I can probably hear you typing away. Waking in a familiar panic around midnight, I sat up in my bed, peered out my window over the backyard, and under the bright full moon, I saw a figure next door. He was just skin and bone, but very tall, bald top with tangled silver hair that ran down to his slender shoulders. He had a terrible overbite, and several jagged teeth pointed down into his lower jaw. His nose was crooked as if once broken. His white chest was bare, and he wore only a heavy, ancient green pair of overalls that didn't seem to fit him. The nails on his fingers and toes were a good 2 inches long. I could never see his eyes behind his gigantic goggles like World War II pilots might have worn, or a welder. Moonlight glint in each lens, as big as a bear mat in his hands. In his hands was a rusted watering can that sprinkled onto the plants. Didn't look like water. It was thick and black. The more I think about it, it kind of looked like blood. Discord by Moria Fox. August 14th, 2013. My name is Agent Swan of the CDC, and the following is a brief record of events that are, supposed to keep a record and documentation of the details of my case. On August 14th, 2013, miners in Saudi Arabia discovered a cave in which they believed to be only contained in an ancient layer of dust over gold. It was a surprising degree that the mining company would drive the bosses to order employees to dig deeper and deeper. One employee fell through a thin layer of stone and nearly died. Out of fear, the man began threatening lawsuits if the dig wasn't shut down. Fearful of further injury of the staff, and already, believing the gold to be depleted, the executive shut down the site, and the man soon began acting unusually obsessive over worms, being immature and sometimes even muttering to himself in public. People around him attributed his behavior on behalf of his near-death experience. October 20th, 2013. All of Saudi Arabia and many thousands of other countries have begun behaving in the same way. Could it be something that's happening in there? In other news, a rare parasite was found infecting elderly women in China who was admitted into a hospital after sustaining a gunshot wound during a robbery. We've been assigned to analyze the parasite to see if we can learn if it's dangerous or not, but as far as I can tell, I've never seen anything like it. November 15th, 2013. It seems that the parasite have been caused a new influx of weird behavior, and the infected must be at least about 10% of the population. No reported cases of this parasite have been documented in the Western world yet. A colleague of mine have been previously joking, saying that we should give the parasite an official name and call it the Discord worm because of its random disorganized behavior it causes. My boss just ordered me and my team to start working on a bug or drug to kill it. My wife and I decided not to have children. We don't think we could after what we just saw. We're waiting for the police to take our statements before we go home. January 10th, 2014. The airline companies must be celebrating. There's actually been a recent boom in random vaccinations around the world. Still, no cases of the parasite in the West. What's odd though is that there's been a, recently found cult in Arizona worshipping a deity called Discord. May 5th, 2014. It's easy to tell that we need this drug more than ever. There was a surge of popularity in collecting earthworms as a hobby. This may be an effect of the parasite, but we're not sure yet. July 30th, 2014. My wife and I decided to go visit New Zealand on a suggestion of hers. We took our vacation kit and provided us with, new airline regulars. Now that the parasite has found its way into every country, the world is doing what they can to keep functioning normally without getting more infected. September 12th, 2014. The Discord parasite has been found to be working hard to, spreading to healthy individuals. I'm going to go listen to some music and enjoy the wonderful feeling I'm having now. October 9th, 2014. My earthworm collection is looking pretty good. I named each and every one of them. I memorized the entire map of the world and the type of worms that live in different places. My wife has boobies. Boobs. October 10th, 2014. All glory to Discord. On October 10th, 2014, the humane race surrendered itself to the parasite known as Discord. The species begun breeding themselves and breeding humans like cattle to provide more vessels for their young and lay eggs in the corpses of the dead. If you guys want to support this channel, please donate some money to my Patreon. Every dollar helps, and if you guys would like to, simply help out with production, watching this video, sharing this video, liking this video, and commenting on this video will help me out a lot. If you like these kinds of stories, I'll have 2 linked up right now. I'll leave this on screen for a little bit while you listen to the sweet tunes of the Dead Island theme song. I'm just gonna head off now. Thanks for listening.